I call to order the meeting of the August 8th Portsmouth Community Network Broadband Authority meeting. Welcome, everyone. Glad to see you here after a little short hiatus, but we're ready to move forward. And we'll have Madam Secretary fill in. Ashley, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Barnes is not here. Mayor Glover.
Here.
Councilman Hugel.
Present.
Councilman Moody.
Here.
Councilman Tillage.
Here.
Dr. Whitaker is not here. And Mrs. Lucasberg.
Here. Thank you. We have before us our agenda, and we need to adopt the minutes from our last meeting, which was held on May 9th. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those minutes?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and second that we adopt the minutes of the May 9th meeting, and Madam Secretary, if you will call the roll. Call for.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes is absent. Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Aye.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker is absent. Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Our next agenda item is the discussion, our topics, and we'll turn it over to Attorney Swearinger, Director of Human Information Technology, Cliff Ace.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Madam Chair, members of the Southside Network Broadband, the Portsmouth Community Network Broadband Authority. We have an update for you this evening. Okay. As you know, with regards to the broadband vision here in the city of Portsmouth, it has been council's vision of becoming a smart city. And so with that, we've constructed a 55-mile fiber optic network, which is to serve as the foundational component for the municipal and citizen connectivity. Ultimately, this 55-mile network will connect with the Southside Network Authority, which is the regional ring. And of course, that's a 120-mile loop that runs through the cable landing station in the city of Virginia Beach. And that puts us at a strategic advantage when it comes to being able to offer to our businesses and some organizations or entities through this organization the opportunity to extend to them excess capacity that we have. We have some 288 strands that we have in our fiber deployment, and we look for opportunities to offer that to the public. Progress on the city's fiber ring. We have some 56 sites or government facilities and entities that are connected via our fiber ring here around the city of Portsmouth. You may notice that at our last gathering, we were at 95% completion, and now we're at 96, right? So there are two segments of the fiber ring which will allow us to be fully redundant once those two segments are completed. Those two that are not fully completed, one of which is the Churchland Bridge. Yep. And of course, we're working with VDOT on that, and they haven't really given us a date when that's going to be fully completed. But I'll remind you that the original date that they had set out for that bridge to be completed was November 2021. Right. So we're still kind of in a holding pattern in that regard for full redundancy of our ring. And then the other site is a small segment, about 75 feet, going across College Drive, connecting us with the city of Suffolk. And that's a parallel also, not only with our local ring, but also with the regional ring that needs that connectivity. Suffolk is full agreement with that. And so we're probably a week away from that being complete and finished as of this morning, talking to our construction partner to finish that piece. So within a week, they say that they'll be finished that part. That's why we've updated this to 96 from 95% complete.
We have paused for a question. Mr. Moody had a question?
Oh, my apologies.
No,
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. On the Churston Bridge piece, obviously, there's only one new bridge being built. Why couldn't fiber optic go on the other side that's not slated for anything as far as removal?
Yeah, we can check into that, but I'm really not sure.
From my understanding, it was already designated as far as the plan when they built it as part of the new build. But I can further ask the city engineer about it, but from my understanding, that's where it was slated to be because it's a new bridge. The fiber ring could go there. You don't have to worry about trying to update it later if there is something going on with the other side. It was always slated to be that.
Yeah, I understand. I wouldn't think the fiber optic cable would require a lot of alteration to the bridge to be able to run the cable across. And the reason why I'm saying that, here we are, May first week in August, and we've only gained 1% completion. But I would like to further check into that, why we can't run the cable under the bridge where no construction activity is underway.
And I know we've had this conversation in the past, but I'll go back to my notes. But I can provide a follow-up for that.
Okay, thanks.
And the bridge should be completed by November.
Okay,
I think that was the completion date for the bridge.
all right. And so we'll follow up with that
Thank you.
via Madam City Manager. All of the fiber that has been run has been terminated, it's been tested. So we're just in that posture of waiting for the full redundancy. One of the things I'll say is that's not necessarily a deal breaker with regards to us starting up our fiber ring. That's so that we will have full redundancy in the ring. So our plan is to light up the fiber in areas going to our government entities, even though there won't be the full redundancy just yet. But we'll go ahead and start that process of starting to get us using the backbone that we already have. We've chosen the fiber consultant, which was something that we've all been kind of waiting for to happen. The company is Broadband Telecom Services, LLC. It's a SWAM certified entity here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. They were founded in 2017. The president, Mr. Jeff Biku, has some 30-plus years of broadband deployment experience, data center management, even management and coordination, collaboration with internet service providers, and has even actually owned his own internet service, his own ISP, and sold that company. He's here with us today, and I'd like to have him stand so that we'll know who he is, Mr. Jeff Biku.
Good afternoon,
Hi,
everyone.
how are you? Nice to meet you. Good.
You guys have any questions for me? Feel free to ask.
Oh, questions, members?
They're gonna fire at
They
him.
being shy right now, maybe later. Okay.
Mr. Biku and Broadband Telecom Services, they're very experienced and familiar with the regional ring, the Southside Network Authority, and the regional ring that we have. In fact, they were involved at the inception of that partnership that came together. Broadband Telecom Services literally drafted and put together the master plan for the region and this partnership of the regional ring. So he's quite familiar already with the regional ring, what leverage that we'll be able to get as a local broadband authority that you have here. He's familiar with the organization, just been following things in the region over the years. Also has experience leading digital equity initiatives. He's secured over some $60 million in broadband deployment grants for localities. He's familiar with last mile deployment and funding opportunities. Most recently, you'll recall the federal government, Ms. Terry is smiling, she's quite happy to see that opportunities for more funding can come our way. You'll recall that in June, the federal government and the Biden administration announced some $42 billion, with a B, billion dollars across the country for broadband deployment. And the name is probably self-explanatory for the purpose of those funds. It's for broadband equity, access, and deployment. So BEAD is the acronym that's used. The purpose for these funds literally is to reach areas that perhaps under other funding sources or resources from the federal government were not able to actually receive broadband access. And, I get sometimes particular about using the term broadband because it's defined according to whatever the federal administration happens to be. So that term changes according to what the speeds are, which in turn sometimes misrepresents who has what I believe to be adequate speeds. Thus, we end up with the BEAD funding because you may recall like federal funding that went out before and in the past across the country and across the Commonwealth allowed for middle mile deployment. So running the backbone and getting it out where you can actually later figure out how to get it to the doorstep or to the residences. Well, this piece is to offer opportunities to get it that last mile to the individuals, to their residences, and not only say in the case of multiple unit dwellings, apartments, et cetera, instead of just getting it to the complex, but this funding will allow for you to make sure that it literally gets to every unit, every resident. And a part of that process with BEAD, you'll know that the Commonwealth has been, as noted here, our share, the Commonwealth share, will be $1.48 billion. With that $1.48 billion has come a challenge. So when the original maps came out saying that these areas were covered, the Commonwealth, Dr. Tamara Holmes and her team put forth more challenges to that map than any other state. And the purpose for the challenges was to put us in a posture in the Commonwealth to say, we don't agree. You're showing more coverage than what we believe actually exists. And so she sent in preliminary data to show that there were addresses that really don't have adequate speeds. So as a part of our process, as a part of our partnership, as a part of the consulting that we'll get with Broadband Telecom Services, is communicating to the public how we can challenge if their address has been reported as one that's adequate. Then we're going to show them how they will be able to challenge whether or not they have the adequate speeds. That'll come through a portal that they'll log into, and it will determine whether or not they have what we call 100/20, as defined as adequate speeds. And we'll work along with the consultant and the community to set up opportunities to share with them how we'll actually do that.
Okay. Can we pause for a questions right here? Any questions that, okay, then I have one.
I have lots of questions.
Okay,
but
we
I'm
have
gonna
some
save
at the
it to
end. But since we're right here and our consultant is here, I guess you could tell us, or you could tell us what is going to actually be done with the consultant. Is it going to be just working with the fiber or with you or with us, or what's actually going to be the interaction? We may not have any.
It's a little bit of all of that.
Okay.
And that's coming in the next slide.
Okay, I'm just ahead of the presentation.
Absolutely.
And then the 1.4 billion, we don't know what Portsmouth's share of that is going to be for the Commonwealth.
Correct. So that's what's been in draft form promised to the Commonwealth. Now we have to prove that that's what we need. And so the state has to show to the federal government what addresses are included in that need. And the way that the state gets its information, what to report to the feds, is from the localities. So we will be working along with Broadband Telecom Services to help our citizens report whether or not they have adequate speeds or not. And through that process, that's going to show what Portsmouth's share will actually end up being.
Sure.
So we'll be working closely with the consultant. He'll be working closely not only with IT and on the city side, but he'll be working closely with the broadband authority here.
Okay, I think we had a question, Mr. Moody.
Yeah, by addresses, you're speaking of zip codes? Zip codes?
Literally address to the.
Literally addresses.
So not just the zip code,
It's a
but honing
physical
in
location.
to right to your home, to your address. If they're saying you have adequate speeds, then you're going to want to log into this portal and report what your speed happens to be. So
Okay, is that process underway? Because that looks like to me that'd be a laborious process.
yeah, so we'll be communicating through community meetings, through a marketing plan, all of that, to make sure that folks understand that that's something that they'll need to do on behalf of the city and partnering with the city as a full initiative, working along with also the public information officer and marketing team.
So it's up to the localities to get that information
Yes, sir.
from individual users.
Addresses.
Yep.
Okay.
Attorney Swerving?
I just wanted to clarify something about this grant money. While it will be earmarked for Portsmouth based on those numbers that they get, that doesn't come to Portsmouth city government. That's essentially going to be the grant money that's available for private entities to do build-outs in Portsmouth to connect those addresses that aren't being served. So while it's possible that the fiber ring in Portsmouth could benefit from that if it has private partners that are involved, or it has private entities that want to jump on our backbone and then build out to those locations, we can't use that as a government entity.
Yeah.
So similarly to EDA, where they get grant money and they dole it out to Portsmouth businesses, would this money come to the Broadband Authority to be doled out, or every business would have to apply to the state for grant funding?
Go ahead.
So the way that the process will work, the funding for BEAD funding, unlike some of the funding in the past would come straight to the government entity, the BEAD funding actually will go to the companies. And then, but in order for them to get the grant, they have to work with the municipality in partnership and show that they're working in partnership and they will actually receive that funding. That money goes straight to the private entity. But it has to be in partnership and in sync with the municipality. And of course, the coordination of all of that will happen through the consultant.
And on that same bullet, you have in parentheses, connect schools. So is that grant funding available to PPS
So
to
that,
leverage school connections, or how's it happen?
I think in the past, the rate in which the city was able to offer to the schools was a little bit less than what they desired. There's something called E-rate that the school systems, libraries, et cetera, can connect to broadband entity through fiber at certain rates through their providers, less than what everybody else pays. However, I made a special note there to point out this entity and what you will be able to offer to the schools is going to be better, right, than what the E-rate opportunities that the schools had. So hopefully the network authority will be in a posture to offer that opportunity to the school systems, and they will bite on that opportunity.
Great.
Okay, I'm a little unclear what it is that we'll be billing the schools for. Are we going to bill Portsmouth Public Schools to use our ring, or are we billing the schools to have access to the ISP?
For the access to the ring, if they would like to do so, and because of them going that route of our ring, they will have ISP rates that will be phenomenal, that they would never otherwise be able to get. And the speeds will be much greater. So if you think of where we are today for the city, our speeds, what we pay for, is somewhere in the neighborhood of a 1 gig circuit. But through our plans and arrangements that we've been making, we're looking at like 10 gigs for a fraction of what we're paying. So if we're able to get those kinds of rates, then the school system would be able to benefit from those same type of rates as well.
So are we planning to bill PPS to use the ring? Yes, sounds like we're taking money out of the left pocket and put it in the right.
Well, you're the authority, and so
We have to decide.
you'll make those decisions along the way.
Mr. Burns.
My question was aligned with his almost. What's stopping us from just not charging them at all?
You're the authority, and you'll make those decisions.
I was just trying to make sure that, we didn't have to, like it wasn't a law that required that the city charge. That's why.
And how is it set up currently?
How's
There's no fees.
Nothing
Yes,
there.
none. Okay.
And see, what'll happen is we'll all come back, or depending on if you all continue as this authority, but it still has to come before council at some point. So when that authority gets together and determine a fee schedule and because again, we were in this for the purpose of a reduction in expenses, but along the way, the benefit for those who could benefit in our lower income areas would receive that benefit. So the authority will make that determination, but the fee schedule is going to drive a lot of things that we do. And once we get to that, you'll have the authority to make that. It will be to your discretion of how you would like us to proceed. And if that is an exemption, then that's what we would consider.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Well, I guess my question would be a legal question. Since we're going to be charging connection fees, will the authority have to have a uniform rate schedule instead of, this is the Portsmouth school system, yeah, we want to
Give them a discount.
we want to make them whole on it, but Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so's business over here, you're going to get a different rate. Or PRHA, you're not going to get the same rate as the school system. See what I mean?
Right, we'll dig, I think, oh, no, I'm not, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Currently, there are no, currently, the authority has the ability to determine what the rate schedule will be. Customarily, it is a uniform rate system. However, we can carve out exceptions, like, for example, the school piece could be a carve-out if it's because it's a altruistic entity that we want to accommodate. That's essentially is something that we would have to pay for, similar to what the councilman or member Hugel would say. It's just taking money out of one pocket, putting it in the other. But it just depends on what the authority suggests, and then council adopts.
And then outside of that, you have what we have, and then we have dark fiber. I don't want you to get those two kind of. Yeah, we need to just delineate between the two, because this is going to be for sale, and this is not for sale, but for lease.
Right.
And this is going to be ours. So
Okay.
you determine that structure as a governing body.
Great. Great. Mr. Hayes, you can proceed.
With that partnership that we joined with the consultant, we'll be doing some of the key milestones and major tasks of this arrangement will be, one, regular consultation with the IT department here and working with the CIO, continuous task evaluation and guidance, if you will, if we see other things along the way that we need to work on. And we've already, through communication with some of the other CIOs who also work along with broadband telecom services, have some great ideas, I think, that we can benefit from as well with regards to some other technology needs that we have in the city. And we can go into those a little bit more detail a little later. Also, developing a strategic marketing plan for the city with regards to broadband deployment here. That includes market research and analysis, the identification of interested businesses and other opportunities, drafting of the strategic marketing plan, review and revision of the plan, and of course, the finalization and presentation of the marketing plan to City Council and the local broadband authority. Next is advising on the fiber ring connectivity. So analysis of the regional fiber ring connection points to find opportunities or parties interested in improved connectivity. Attending some of the Southside Network Authority meetings alongside the CIO and the city manager to strategize connections based on final cost and feasibility. And then, of course, advising on local fiber network usage. So the research and identification of ways to leverage the local fiber network for businesses, the analysis of current uses of those opportunities, development of the proposal for optimal usage of excess capacity, and then, of course, presentation of the final proposal to the city and the Portsmouth Community Network Broadband Authority. And another major task would be advising on the leveraging of fiber ring for our government use. So the analysis of the purposes in which we've originally designed it and set it up for our government use, taking a look at that via an audit to determine if we still want to use those same methodologies or can we improve upon that for cost avoidance strategies for the city. And then, of course, to develop a strategy for digital adoption and equity. This is to keep current on the state's efforts of development of the digital equity plan for the state and obviously for us as a city. Next, to create a city group which can fill opportunities and provide insights on relevant projects. The drafting of a city strategy for digital adoption, digital equity, and closing the digital divide. When we talk about adoption, we need to understand that, yes, we want to, with rising tides of bringing broadband to the entire community, all over the community, but also to make sure that we're able to help people understand the usage and the purpose and the benefits thereof. So we're not in a time any longer where access to the internet and broadband and high speeds is a nicety or something nice to have, but it's literally a necessity when it comes to a lot of fundamental needs in our daily lives. So we want to make sure that there's full adoption in the community when it comes to digital, when it comes to the internet. And that includes understanding the security when you're online as well. And then finally is to develop a public engagement methodology plan. So that would include awareness campaigns, which will involve the development of a series of campaigns designed to educate businesses and public about the benefits of fiber optic connectivity, digital adoption, and closing the digital divide. Second, community meetings. So in other words, we're going to organize regularly with community organizations and community meetings in different areas across the city, providing opportunities for the public to learn about the project, ask questions, and provide input. And then, of course, through workshops and seminars, webinars, focusing on digital literacy, the benefits of fiber optic connectivity and its uses for local businesses. And then, of course, surveys and questionnaires that will be distributed digitally and online for people to participate in. And that's going to help us understand the needs of local businesses and our community and to improve upon them. And then, of course, finally, are those partner events. So to collaborate with local businesses, schools, community organizations, et cetera, for events to reach a wider audience and promote digital adoption. And that concludes the presentation. Didn't know if there were any further questions.
Mr. Hugo.
Yes, ma'am, thanks. So, back on slide 3, you indicate that the fiber is terminated and tested. And I guess that means next step is to get equipment configured on either end of the fiber so that we can start lighting it up and using it. So I think that's the final bullet there, configuration of equipment, internal and external. So I get it that we don't have to wait on the Churchland Bridge because that's just fiber redundancy. What's the status or timeline for procuring and installing, configuring and installing the internal equipment at the Portsmouth sites? I mean, how far away are we from being able to light up the internal ring and start using it for city government?
So currently, much of that equipment is already in hand, and so we are working with a consultant already that was contracted to do not only the external routing and configuration, but to begin the configuration for our own internal network, working with our network team here in the city. They are literally training them now how to configure the rest of that equipment so that we'll be ready for deployment. I did not have a specific timeline, but I'll be happy to provide that in the coming days of what that looks like.
So can you give us a guesstimate? Are we weeks away,
Okay.
months away,
Months
years away?
Months away.
Months, okay. And how about the South Side network? How far away are they from lighting up the South Side fiber?
So we're in a posture to start ours prior to when they finish, because they're coordinating these rings and runs of conduit all around the entire region. And so it's my understanding they're at least 2 years away from which that piece will be completed. But we're in a much better posture. It won't take 2 years. We should be able to use ours much sooner than that.
Okay, and then over on slide 5, you have a bunch of tasks and milestones. I'll give you some things to think about. So on the strategic marketing plan, we have an innovation district. We need the strategic marketing plan to specifically take a look at how we're going to market broadband into the innovation district. We're going to talk in the next agenda item about structuring the broadband authority differently than it is now. Seems that we ought to ask the consultant for advice on what kind of skill sets we should be looking for to populate the broadband authority so that we get the right balance of technical people and business people and citizens of Portsmouth. The third bullet talks about getting advice on how to use the local fiber network. Seems like we also should be asking for advice on how do we position ourselves with the South Side Network Authority so that Portsmouth leads and doesn't get the leftovers. I mean, every time we do a regional thing, seems like we end up with kind of whatever's left. And in this case, as you pointed out, we're ahead of the South Side Network Authority, so we can take advantage of that with advice from the consultant, I think, and get in position to make sure that we get what we need out of them in those discussions. And if we don't do that, then we're setting ourselves up to go to the table and kind of get whatever's left. And then kind of coming back to the rate structure discussion, seems like we should be asking the consultant to help us gather information on what a rate structure ought to look like and who ought to pay and who ought not to pay and how much, well, you know, what's the going rate, if you will. Thanks.
Yes, sir. We made all of those notes, and we'll be happy to follow up via our interim city manager. We'll provide that update to Ms. Terry, and then she'll disseminate it to.
Member Hugo, the only thing I'll point out immediately that just sort of my spidey sense went off is that we're members of that regional board, and we have to be very careful about what information we're using for our benefit. The term you use, I know what you mean, but there are conflict concerns that we have to be mindful of. But we also can leverage ourselves to, when we're having those discussions, to make sure that Portsmouth is taking advantage of the fact that we have the knowledge base to be able to have thoughtful discussions and therefore position ourselves a little bit better. Secondly, with respect to our consultant advising on fees, we have to also remember that we're a locality and that we are treated very differently than a private entity. And so we want to be mindful of the fact that we have to have the authority to do the things that we need to do versus, entities that have a little more leeway. So I just want to keep those two thoughts in mind as we're moving forward on those two things.
I'm completely confident that you'll keep us between the guardrails.
For sure.
Absolutely.
I have one question. So Portsmouth, our ring is 55 miles, and the South Side Network ring is 130 miles. So this 75 miles jointly being done with this Southside Network for Suffolk, is that theirs or is that ours running through there?
So it's only 75 feet.
75, okay, feet. Need my glasses.
That's a small segment
Okay, but that's all that they
going across
have right
the
now.
College Drive overpass.
Right.
75 feet.
Okay.
That was never completed in the past.
Okay,
The leadership in Suffolk now, CIO and permitting folks, are in a posture that they agree that we need to have that access and that the regional organization needs to have that access. And they're moving diligently now. So within a week, that'll be
no, that's gonna be done. Okay, so I was just wondering who that belonged to, if it was us or if it's Suffolk's,
It's us, but we'll have to connect.
through Suffolk
Through
to
Suffolk.
be able to get it through. Okay. So really through the south side, I mean, Portsmouth is still the only city with fiber miles.
This far along. I'm sorry.
Chesapeake is starting their own build for their own fiber ring as well.
But they don't have a authority
Right.
They do not have an authority now.
as you do, or as we do.
Okay. Question, Mr. Hewitt?
So back to the discussion that we may have with the Southside Network Authority, did I recall that when we finished the Churchland Bridge connection, that the Southside Authority actually will be using our fiber across the bridge as a redundant part of their loop? I mean, so it seems like that maybe puts us in a position when we start having negotiations with both the Southside Authority and with the other localities that we can trade.
Right. Was it the Churchland Bridge that was on? I forget which bridge it is.
It's going towards the Midtown Tunnel.
That's it, right.
Okay.
We do have that.
West Norfolk Bridge then.
Yeah, we do have that section where we have extra large, the term is conduit.
Conduit.
And we have extra space in there that was put in there specifically for the Southside Network Authority. And we've already talked to them about getting approximately 1.3 million for them to just put their own fiber through that. And we're working on that agreement now.
Okay.
And that would be something that would come to council.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you for the presentation. And we will move on. Next item on our agenda is the update on the City Council resolution regarding membership for Portsmouth Community Network Broadband Authority. So, Madam Interim City Manager, Madam City Attorney, do you have that information or any updates?
Sure, I was gonna kick it off to Ms. Swaringa. but,
Okay.
Sure. So we did, based on the previous meeting, come up with some resolutions that council can consider that would allow for council to remove people who are appointed to this board, just make it very clear that that power exists, and then that would stipulate that from now on, new appointees cannot be council members, and that appointees do not have to live, work, or own property in Portsmouth. So if that is something that council would like to do, that needs to be noticed ahead of time to have a public hearing, but that could be prepared simultaneously as council is reviewing that resolution to see if that works for them, and that could be placed on a work session in the future, if that is what this board would like council to do.
So we do have a time frame on this. Is it the end of December?
Well,
Or-
the notice has to be 30 days. So remember, first of all, you all can resign at any time. The only issue that we had to address was that the Articles of Incorporation did not provide a clear method for removal for those who did not want to resign. So the city council, like many other boards and commissions, can remove members. And so that provision would be a change in the Articles of Incorporation if this council so agrees. This is the recommendation based on what the authority gave us the last meeting that we had, which was to open it up to individuals who did not live in the city, to open up a base for varying experience levels in this particular area. And so those changes would be what would need to be incorporated in the Articles of Incorporation. That would require a 30-day notice. And so that we would need timeframe for that. We would have to have a public hearing based on that notice. And then once council votes, then that becomes the official terms of the board, and then movement can be made to appoint and/or resign if that's what you so choose. So there'll be plenty of robust discussion available on what needs to be done here in the city council chamber, but not here in this body.
Okay. So I guess we
maybe
need to go ahead and advertise.
Yeah, so our plan was to go ahead and put out the notice so that we can have the public hearing and the discussion and the language to you all at the last September.
I believe that was what the,
Keep it over it up here, the end of the September meeting? Yes, yes.
So it would happen in this meeting?
It would
The
happen
public
in-
note, I mean, the public hearing would be in this?
No, it would be in a council
In the
meeting.
council, okay.
And so we do it at the end of the month, not to bump up against the public hearings for planning and the like. If the Madam Clerk so determines that we have sufficient time for the notice. Okay.
we'll work it out.
Okay. If not, then it would be an October, November timeframe, if that fits
As
best
early
with
as
it.
we can possibly get it on.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Glover.
And typically, the public hearing will follow the same format as any other public hearing. And we will have speakers come forward. You don't have to sign up for it.
Yep.
Once the public hearing is completed and closed, we will have the discussion with council, and then it'll be a vote, right? As we normally conduct a public hearing.
All right. That's Mr. Hugo.
A question for the clerk, is it premature to, knowing that we're headed in this direction, to advertise to our citizens that there's an opportunity coming and they can apply?
At this point, I would say it would be premature, only because when we do the advertisement, we will pull the language from the resolution that is drawn up by the city attorney's office, just to make sure everything, we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's.
Okay, thank you.
And that language could change, that language could be stricken, or it could be fully adopted, and so we want to leave room for that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we have closed session. We don't have any closed session information, so we'll proceed with new business. And any new business is listed here, future business topics. Any members desiring any topics that have not been already discussed?
So could we get a follow-up from the CIO on status for lighting up locally at
Absolutely.
the next meeting?
Status for lighting up.
Maybe that's not the right terminology. Really, using our local network is kind of the
How we
end
go
game here,
forward.
so.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess if there's any information, because we don't know what to ask our consultant, so maybe if he wanted to present to us.
We haven't planned for the next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, then our next meeting will be held on September 12th at 4 o'clock. And do we have any public speakers? Anybody signed up?
No, ma'am.
Okay, no public speakers, and if there's no other business before us, then we are adjourned. Thank you all for attending.